On today's show, potential NBA Finals preview is this week as OKC comes to town to take on the Cavs. Plus, we'll talk about matchups with Indiana and Toronto on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, my new Substack, The Inside Shot, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. If you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Also, Locked On Cavs now has a daily newsletter introducing the Locked On Cavs newsletter, your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Cavs newsletter. This week is a big one for the Cavs. Wednesday night could be the game of the year in the NBA as Oklahoma City comes to town for the first of two matchups between the Thunder and the Cavs. Cleveland obviously goes into that matchup with the best record in the NBA. They're 31-4. Through their first 35 games. OKC is one game behind them. They're 30-5. So both these teams are off to absolutely historic starts. Brought in Rylan Stiles of Locked On Thunder to talk about that matchup and what he thinks about this Thunder team and how they match up with the Cavs. Then I'm going to talk with Sean Woodley of Locked On Raptors. The Raptors not having a great season. It'll be the third time that the Cavs take on the Raptors this year, but did want to check in with him, see how things are going for our friend Scottie Barnes and how he compares to what Evan Mobley is doing in year number 4. And then we'll wrap up the show today. Tony East drops by Locked On Cavs. Cavs take on the Pacers next Sunday night for the first of two games in a home-and-home back-to-back Sunday and Tuesday. So we'll talk with Tony about the Pacers, who have turned things around. They're back to 500 as we record this here late on Sunday night. So without anything else, going to toss this to the conversation with Rylan. But like I said, make sure you're subscribed anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. And if you're watching on YouTube, do me that favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. Let's get it started. Here's Rylan Stiles. And now we bring in from Locked On Thunder, Rylan Stiles of what could be an NBA Finals preview this week with the Cavs playing host to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Oklahoma City comes into Wednesday night's game on a 15-game winning streak. The Cavs come into this game on a 10-game winning streak. The two teams are both off to historic starts to their seasons, with the Cavs at 31-4, the Thunder at 30-5. Rylan, I just kind of want to start with this, but what has been really the secret to OKC's success so far this season?
Yeah, I think it's their defense and that turning into solid offensive play. I mean, besides SGA, there's very few positives offensively for the Thunder. Even Jalen Williams has regressed a little bit as a go-to scorer, as the book's kind of gotten out on him, and you can overwhelm him at times with your physicality and length, especially when he's in that 4 spot, which he's not necessarily designed to play as a scorer. So they've been able to create more turnovers this season than anyone else. And a weird stat for the Thunder is they have committed more steals. Like, they've gotten more steals than they have committed turnovers themselves. And that helps them offset some of the rebounding woes, which they had last year. They have a little bit of it this year, but Hartenstein's also helped even that up a little bit. But whenever you're creating these possessions with turnovers, you can live with some of the rebound struggles that this team has with just one healthy big throughout this season. Ideally, they'll have Chet and Hartenstein. That's not their reality right now. So the defense just smothering teams. I mean, even going back to the Celtics game on Sunday, Jaylen Brown had 21 points in the first half, 0 in the second half. Derek White had 0 in the second half. Andrew Holiday had 0 in the second half. Boston shot 16% from 3, and no need to tell a team in the East how good Boston is at shooting from 3. So their defense is top of the league stuff. It's truly historic right now. We'll see if that holds true. We're not even halfway through the year yet, but as of right now, it's a historic defense. And then you have the not so secret weapon of SGA, who is one of the best scorers in this league, if not the best scorer in this league, to kind of bail you out of some situations where your offense might lull. But it's been all about the defense.
So with that, and you brought up Chet, who hasn't played for 6 weeks at this point. It feels like maybe a little bit longer. I'm not. You would know the timeline better than me, but I do know that OKC has not seen Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein on the floor together when ultimately that does happen, which won't affect either of the two upcoming matchups that we have between the Cavs and the Thunder. But how do you envision that playing out on the floor, seeing those two guys play together if and when Chet does get fully healthy?
So it will be the first time in this iteration of the Thunder that they can play 48 minutes of a legitimate center, because even Jay Will, who was their backup center last year, he's only 6'9", and like, he's not a real center. You now have not only legitimate centers for 48 minutes, but two top 12, top 10 centers, whatever the marker you want to have with those two guys. And both are elite rim protectors in their own right. And so that just changes how the Thunder can play. And they both have really high offensive skills. With Hartenstein, it's pretty obvious. The passing out of the post is impeccable, and it sets up his lead guards, including his screens, which also helps free up J-Dub, who struggled offensively, and just makes life even easier on SGA. And then for Chet, it's the ability to create his own shot, to hit catch and shoot jumpers from three, and he really displayed a better level of getting downhill in that short time that he did play for those 10 games. We'll see if that can continue to happen post-injury. But just the simple fact that you have two centers now, it sounds so simple, especially to a team in Cleveland that has the luxury of Mobley and Allen. But that is a benefit the Thunder have not enjoyed, and what killed them against Dallas. Because you look at the Chet minutes versus the non-Chet minutes, the Thunder were the way better team when Chet played. They were the way worse team when Chet didn't play. And ultimately, in a 6-game series that ended with a 0-point differential for the series, that was their biggest killer. And now they fixed that problem, but haven't gotten to reap the rewards of fixing that problem yet.
So OKC, as you mentioned, has won with defense. They're number one in the NBA in defensive rating. They've just absolutely shut teams down on that end of the floor. You really don't have to look, I think, any further than the box score for the second half on Sunday in that game against Boston. But offensively, they're fine. I don't think they're a great offensive team. I think they're a good offensive team. I believe as we record this Sunday night, they're 8th in the NBA in offensive rating. Do you think, Rylan, that they have another level or two that they can get to on that end? And if so, how do they get there?
Yeah, so I think that they're almost the inverse of last year's Celtics team, where they were unbelievably great offensively, and then they were just top 10 defensively, and that was enough to get them a championship. And with Oklahoma City, they are historically great defensively, and they leave some to be desired offensively. The gear that they can get to is unlocking Jalen Williams as a scorer, and part of one way to do it would be the two-man game that he developed with Chet Holmgren, who, yes, Hartenstein is a much better screener and in theory creates more space for Shea and J-Dub, but with Chet, you can take that step back as a screener individually for the benefit of when he screens, he's going to pop out to the three and take somebody with him. And if he doesn't, then it's an easy process for J-Dub to just kick it to him for an open three. And so when he takes somebody out of the paint, life gets easier for J-Dub to go to the mid-range and go to the rim and find scoring abilities. Whereas with Hartenstein, at best, he's going to set a screen and go to the elbow, which is exactly where J-Dub wants to be, is at one of the elbows hitting a mid-range jumper. And so cleaning that up with Chet back could change the perception of this offense and make them a bit better. And then it just comes down to they have a lot of streaky players. I mean, Isaiah Joe is a guy that shot 40% last year, and this year he's 36, 38%. Alex Caruso shot 40% last year. And even if you don't believe in Caruso's 40% from a year ago, he's a career 37% three-point shooter, and this year he's just been dreadful from beyond the arc in limited time. He shot 26% from three through 20 games. I don't think that he's a 26% from three shooter. I think that that's going to get better and then give you a sigh of relief with this Thunder offense. So those two things, along with Cason Wallace, who, again, I don't believe in his 40% three-point shooting from a year ago as a rookie, but I also don't believe he's this poor as a shooter, only at 30%. So all of that coming together at the right time could be the perfect storm for the Thunder to really hit their stride.
So as we get ready for, the first of two matchups this week, I'm curious your thoughts as somebody who maybe isn't watching the Cavs every single night because you're so dialed in on the Thunder, but what have you thought about the start that the Cavs have been off to? Like, what are you thinking about with this Cavs team going into Wednesday night?
Yeah, I think that the Cavs should be able to sweep the Thunder series, and that's something that I think is major
Wow.
because this team's only lost 5 games, and the Thunder are great, but this is the matchup that they can really exploit. And you saw Porzingis and the Celtics exploit it in the first half, but having Mobley and Allen is just something that the Thunder can't really compete with right now as they're currently constructed without Chet. That's a huge advantage. But as far as the Cavs go in general, I think they're legitimate contenders, and I think that they're going to be in the East Finals because every metric says so. Like every metric bears out that this isn't some team that's taking the regular season more seriously than somebody else and they're piling up artificial wins. Like they're getting it done in crucial situations. And the only real knock or reservation that you can have on this Cleveland team is the small guard play. And could you exploit that in the playoffs? But I think that those guys aren't just dying out there. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Danny, but like when I watch the Cavs, sure, would you rather have Lou Dort and Cason Wallace defending outside? Obviously. Yeah. But it's not as though you can just abuse, Mitchell and Garland, especially when they get to funnel you into Mobley and Allen out there. And you have some really good wing players who can switch on into favorable matchups defensively. So as long as you don't see those guys start to sink, those two defensively, I don't see a way where you can just out and out exploit this Cleveland team.
Right. And I do think that's an important part about how the Cavs are set up defensively is yes, they've got typically a plus defender playing the 3. They've got Mobley, who is one of the best defenders on the planet. They've got Jarrett Allen, who's a really good defender too. And no one is ever going to confuse Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell with Gary Payton as a defender. But those guys are putting forth, I think, more effort probably on that end of the floor than they ever have in their career. So I do think that's something that you're correct about in your observation is, yeah, are they great? No, but they're putting forth effort. And defensively, I think more often than not, that can I don't want to say that's the bare minimum because watching this league, that it's not. Like I just watched a game with LaMelo Ball playing, and trust me, defensive effort, not his bare minimum because it's bad on that end. And the Cavs are so far away from that. They're giving effort on both ends of the floor every single possession. I think that has been one of the more impressive things that I've seen with this Cavs team. Now, I do want to get you out of here with this, and I might have you on, depending on your answer here, I might have you on again after these two teams are finished playing in a couple of weeks. But do you think that this is a preview of the NBA Finals in June?
Yeah, I think that they absolutely can both get there. I think that they both have things that they have to answer en route there to where I don't know how confident you'd be in like placing a wager on it, but like for the Thunder, I still worry about the fact that, last year they did a great job of taking away Luka and Kyrie. It was PJ Washington and those guys that got hot, and you didn't have anybody to answer them in getting hot. So whenever this game slows down to a half-court game and you can really hone in on taking away stars, it's up to your peripheral players to really help boost you. The Thunder got no boost. The Mavericks got a huge one. Can those role players kind of fill into that spot? And then as we mentioned with Cleveland, I do still have a little bit of concern with their guard defense, but not really to the degree that most would have. So I think that these two teams are in as good of a position as you possibly could be in, along with Boston. I think that those are the 3 teams that everyone would have some combination of them in the NBA Finals right now. Not to say that they're perfect teams, because there's never a perfect team, but if you believe that, like, hey, the mileage that the Celtics have put together, eventually they have to crumble a little bit, and it's hard to repeat. It's incredibly hard to repeat. Then yeah, this could for sure be a finals preview that I think would be one of the best pure basketball final outcome for the NBA. I know that like the NBA media will crap on 2 small market teams, but in terms of just like when the ball's tipped and once the game is happening, you can't get a more fun matchup than this, even without Chet, but especially with Chet.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that this is, from a basketball perspective, the series the NBA should be rooting for. From a media perspective, it's the series that the NBA, of course, will be rooting against. But Rylan, Stiles, Locked On Thunder, if you want to learn more about OKC, about how the Thunder maybe feel heading into this matchup with the Cavs on Wednesday, make sure you give that podcast a listen. Make it your second or third listen today. Locked On Thunder. Again, Rylan does a great job over there. Rylan, thanks so much for the time, man. Very much appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Basketball season heating up, and there's no better way to get real money action while watching your favorite NBA stars than with PrizePicks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just want some friendly competition, PrizePicks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. So here's how it works. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You think LeBron's going to drop 30 points? Maybe Luka, when he gets healthy again, going to have more than 8 assists in a game? Pick more or less. PrizePicks lets you make your predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. Plus, with PrizePicks flex play option, even if one of your picks doesn't hit, you can still double your money. Plus, when you hit, you get your money fast, sometimes as quick as 15 minutes. It's pretty fast, right? We love to see that. We want to get our money quick after a win. It's honestly one of the best ways to keep the game exciting. And to make it even better, now is the perfect time to join, because if you download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA, that's LOCKEDON NBA, to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the PrizePicks app, use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. And coming back onto Locked On Cavs for the third time, it's Sean Woodley, the host of Locked On Raptors. Last time we talked, Sean, you were talking about the Raptors being a fun bad team. Well, lately they've just kind of been bad. 1-9 in their last 10 games. What's been going on north of the border with the Raptors?
Yeah, December is a month that I think we're all going to sort of put in our collective mind palace somewhere that can't be accessed because, it was really rough. They nearly went 0 for December. They didn't win a game between December the 3rd and New Year's Day. And it was tough. Like, they had a tough schedule. That was part of it. Scottie Barnes missed a few games. Jakob Poeltl, notably, who the Raptors just can't be a functional basketball team without. Apparently, he missed 5 or 6 games. RJ Barrett missed some time. Emmanuel quickly missed the entire month. And so it wasn't really like a representative version of the Raptors necessarily, but they did not cover themselves in glory trying to fill in the gaps as they kind of did at the start of the season. They've had injuries all year, but the first couple of months, they were a little bit more sort of adept at fighting through them. They were like this try-hard team that would at least make it kind of miserable for the team that was eventually going to beat them. Not so much the case in December, but with the flip over to the new year, they've finally gotten some health, which is a beautiful thing. We're recording this on Sunday. Monday is going to mark the first time that they will actually have their starting lineup available. Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett, Grady Dick, Scottie Barnes, Jakob Poeltl, a lineup that I think on paper makes a lot of sense, particularly on offense. We'll see how much the defense can hold up as the offense maybe has to outscore some defensive problems there. But this is a lineup a lot of people are really excited about. A similar version of the Raptors starters with Gary Trent Jr. in place of Grady Dick was like a plus 12 points per 100 possessions last year as the second most used lineup for the Raptors. And so we could see, some semblance of like productive, positive basketball now that they have all these guys back. Getting Emmanuel Quickly back on New Year's Day was a massive thing. This team just hasn't really had a point guard all year. They've been asking Scottie Barnes to play a point, which he's just not a point guard. He doesn't have that downhill burst and speed and creation. He's more of a power wing, power forward type. And I think now he gets to kind of occupy that role with Quickly running the show. And then RJ Barrett, I think, is just like a really nice play finisher who works beautifully off of all the guys in the starting 5. And so, I think now the Raptors are still not going to be great. There's still, a lot of youth here. There's a lot of growing to be done and some reps to be gained. But I do think they have a chance of being that fun, bad team once again and actually kind of learning about what they have in this core and starting to actually evaluate and make some of the sort of informed decisions they were hoping to be able to make this summer when they came into this year, hoping they would get a full season runway with these guys.
Well, fun bad is certainly bad or better than just bad. You mentioned Scottie Barnes. Obviously, he and Evan Mobley, 2 members of the 2021 NBA draft class, went 3rd and 4th in that draft. Obviously, going to be compared probably as long as their careers go along. Evan is having by far the best year of his career so far. He's on track, I think, to make the first All-Star team of his career. What has year number 4 for Scottie Barnes been like for Toronto?
been a weird year because he looked pretty good to start the year. There was a game, like the fourth game of the season, where he looked masterful in a game against the Denver Nuggets. It looked like they were going to win. And then he takes a Nikola Jokic elbow, breaks his orbital bone, misses the rest of that game, and misses the next 11 games. And the Raptors go, I think, 2-11 without him, or 2-9 without him, and end up starting 2-12 in the season. It was a rough go there without Scottie Barnes. Then he comes back and he plays 10 games, and those are maybe the best 10 games he's ever played as far as like impacting winning positive basketball when he's on the floor, the team falling apart when he's off, the stuff that you want from your sort of creative engine star player. And then he got hurt again. He hurt his ankle, and then he comes back kind of quickly from that ankle injury, even though it looked really serious. Didn't look himself for a couple weeks, took a couple other knocks. He had a hip thing he was kind of fighting through, played through these injuries, but just didn't look himself. And then Emmanuel quickly comes back, and in the first game, Quickly's there. Barnes moves away from having to be the point guard that he's not, and he puts up 33, 13, and 5 on 14 of 18 shooting. And it's like, oh, okay, like having a point guard unleashes a version of Scottie Barnes that's not overtaxed as an on-ball creator, is someone who can just be like a really great play finisher, a secondary creator, an awesome defender, a passer, all that stuff that he wasn't really free to do when he just kind of had to run point guard out of necessity. And so, yeah, I think we're going to actually sort of see now that they've got their team back. What does fourth-year Scottie Barnes in earnest actually look like playing with the team that the Raptors have kind of built around him to complement him? And so, ask me in a month where we're at with Scottie Barnes. There have been really high highs, some pretty low lows this year. It's kind of an incomplete for me on him so far this year, though.
Well, as we record this, Toronto 8-27. Obviously, that record will change before they take on the Cavs on Thursday night in Cleveland, but that's a record that tells me they're kind of playing for the Cooper Flag sweepstakes rather than to get into the NBA play-in tournament in the Eastern Conference. With that said, are there any guys on the Raptors that you look at that could be candidates to be traded away before next month's trade deadline?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be much that's like splashy with this team at the deadline. I think there is maybe a world where Jakob Poeltl gets looked at as a guy to get moved, but the reason to move Poeltl would be if you were trying to really sell out for the tank. They've already done that. Like they're 8-27. They're like 5.5 games out of the play-in, I think, or even more than that. Like they're capped at like probably 7th in the lottery standings. I don't think they're going to fall or rise any higher than that. And so I think they're just going to keep Poeltl because they want to be a serious team next year. Scottie Barnes is on his max. Emmanuel Quickly's in year 2 of his big deal. Like they're going to want to kind of hit go and be a real team after getting a high pick again this summer. And I think Jakob Poeltl is pretty essential to doing that, as they've shown while they've gone, I think, what is it now, 4-33 without him over the last 2 seasons. Like they need Poeltl. He's not getting traded. I'd be pretty shocked if that happens. Beyond that, I think Bruce Brown, like we'll see, he just came back. He's looked pretty sprightly since returning from knee surgery. He's playing on 2 legs, which he said he just didn't do for basically all of last year. And so maybe he gets you a second-round pick or 2. Maybe he gets you the Dorian Finney-Smith return at the very high end by the deadline, but I don't know if that's going to come. We'll see. $23 million is a big number to move midseason. And then you have like expiring guys. There's Chris Boucher. Maybe a team looks at him as like a rebounding energy guy to help as like a 10th man for a playoff push. I don't necessarily think he's helping a playoff team get over the top, but maybe some team looks at him as like a cheap ad for an expiring deal. And then Davion Mitchell's another one. He's been okay in his role as like a defensive off-ball guard type. I think, he's not someone you want running your offense by any means. He's not good at that, but he's a very good defensive player. He's hitting like 33% of his threes on the season, so it's not great, but for a guy who brings his on-ball defensive juice, maybe a team talks themselves into him for a second-round pick. That's kind of it, though. It's not a team. They kind of did their teardown last year with Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. They're kind of now just in the mode of, let's see what we got. And yeah, maybe we trade away those expiring guys, but for the most part, I think it's going to be pretty status quo for this team through the deadline.
Well, for the third time on Thursday night, the Cavs will see what the Toronto Raptors have this year. It's the third of 4 matchups. If you want to hear more about the Raptors, check out Locked On Raptors. Sean does a great job up north, keeping everybody updated on a fun, bad Raptors team this year. Sean, thanks so much for doing this, man.
Anytime, Danny.
Today's show, of course, brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, and so much more. If you're looking for NFL, obviously we've got playoffs coming up. Cleveland Browns not going to be involved, but a lot's going to be involved. I would like to point out Cincinnati is not going to be involved either. If you want to look at NBA, something that caught my eye as I was scrolling through FanDuel a little bit earlier, Evan Mobley has risen up the most improved player odds. He is now 5th in the NBA in odds at plus 1,000. He's behind Tyler Hero, Jalen Johnson, Cade Cunningham, Norm Powell, and then it's him. The way Evan's playing, listen, he's going to be a first-time All-Star. I don't know that he wins this award. I don't know that Tyler Hero wins this award either. I'm very curious to see what happens with him as Jimmy Butler. That situation continues to rage on in Miami. But I think Evan or Cade Cunningham could be a pretty smart play here if you're on FanDuel again. Evan's at plus 1,000 for most improved player. It's hard for me to find a player that's been much more improved. Also, the Cavs have moved up. Their Eastern Conference odds, they're now tied for second with New York at plus 500 to win the East. And in the NBA championship realm, they're still 4th at plus 1,100. But FanDuel is the place for you to go if you're interested in that or any of the NFL playoff action going on. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com today. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And for the first time this season, the Indiana Pacers will be squaring off with the Cleveland Cavaliers. It is the final Central Division opponent for the Cavs to see. Bring in Tony East now to talk about them. And the Pacers, Tony, were a team that made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, lost to the Boston Celtics in 4 games, and have, I think it's fair to say, probably underachieved so far this season. What has gone wrong that's led to them being a team below 500 as we finally make our way into 2025?
Yeah, how is it possible that it's 2025 and there's no Pacers Cavs yet? I mean, the Pacers played everyone else in the Central Division twice. It's really strange how this has gone. Yeah, they're not happy to be 18-18, certainly, as of us talking. And their first, I'd say through the end of November, was really head scratching in a lot of ways. And in some ways, they could explain it away and understand it, which made it less painful than some of these other teams falling short of expectations this year. And that's because they were really hurt, and they still have been a little hurt. They were down 3 starters pretty quickly in the season. Aaron Nesmith was missing time. Andrew Nembhard was missing time. And then Isaiah Jackson tore his Achilles, and James Wiseman tore his Achilles within the first 6 games of the season. And that doesn't even account for other guys who have been in and out. Obi Toppin's missed some time. Miles Turner's missed. I don't need to go through the list of names, but that does add up very quickly. They were starting 2-way contract players for a couple weeks. It's just the reality they were in, but they still had Tyrese Haliburton and Pascal Siakam for every single game this season. And at some point you shouldn't, be 10-15 when you have your 2-star players. And that's where the rest of their struggles really came into light. And that's that Haliburton wasn't very good in their first 15 games. He would admit it all the time. We'd ask him, he couldn't find the answers. He made 28% of his threes in that stretch. He shot well under 40%. He's averaging 15 points a game. The passing was still kind of there, but the team's pace wasn't the same because of the guys that were in and out. Just everything was different than what made them who they were last year, which was a star point guard, a really strong identity, and a bunch of players that could support that identity. And then they had none of that to start this season. They've gotten way back to that. That was a really bad sentence. They've gotten back to that recently. Haliburton looks great again these last 20 or so games. He's back at about an all-star level. They're healthy again, minus Aaron Nesmith. Their pace is back. Their offense looks really good in the year 2025 so far, albeit in only 2 games. They're back to 500 because they've reestablished that stuff, but there's still this kind of underlying fear of is this so feeble? Could this all just go away because they started so poorly?
Right. What do you think has led to that turnaround? Because they got off to that slow start. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They are back up to 500, which I wasn't necessarily someone that was super high on the Pacers as repeating going back to the conference finals this year, but I didn't think that they would get off to the starter. I didn't think they'd be a bad team the way that they were for the first part of this season so far. But was there a moment or was there something that you look back at and say, okay, that's when this team kind of was able to flip the switch on and become something that resembled the Pacers team we thought we would see this year?
Yeah, 2 things stand out in that way. One is the actual opposite of what happened last season, the in-season tournament time off that they had, right? Last year going to the finals in Vegas this year, and the Cavs had this. Every team really had this, but that 4 or 5 day gap between the last game that was played before those NBA Cup games and the restart of the regular season, And every team can say the same thing. Yes, this is great. We get to practice, but the Pacers stunk to start the season. So it was uniquely helpful to them and their health situation. And after those practices, they've looked a lot better. They refocused on the possession battle. They're taking way more shots than their opponent in a lot of these games now. Their defense has been the Pacers' defense has been better, not good, but better. That's an important distinction with a team like them. And they're taking more threes, not a ton more threes, but more threes than they were early in the season. Another thing that was a problem for them ever since they've lost Buddy Hield, they've struggled with that. But the real big turnaround point has been Andrew Nembhard coming back. And I know that no one thinks of him as a star because he's not a star, but he is an incredibly good player and a crazy key part of the Pacers identity. He played the first 2 games he returned. He only was playing in the first half. Then he played a third game in Chicago where he only played in the third quarter. And they have won 8 of 11 since he's played all 4 quarters of games. And he just does everything they need from a player. He takes pressure off of Haliburton by being able to attack the paint. He's their best defensive player on the team. He can shoot. He is just really, really good. And 3-and-D players next to a star player are really valuable. So his return has been really understated, along with time to actually integrate him and a new backup center in Thomas Bryant. All of a sudden, they've been floating. They look great.
So one of the things fundamentally that looks different about this Pacers team from last year is the speed at which they play. It's not to say they're playing at a very slow pace, because they're not, but they're not playing at a breakneck pace that they were last year. Last season, they were number 2 in the NBA behind Washington in pace. This year, they're all the way down to number 7. I say all the way down as if that's a far drop, but it is a considerable difference in pace. Has that been something that's been done on purpose for Indiana, or has that just been the result of a few different things?
Result of a few different things. The rank part's really interesting, right? Because I don't think their actual raw pace numbers is lower than last year, but it's not so much lower. But they're in a mix of teams 5 through 15 or something that are all pretty close to their number. And it's kind of this been league adjustment to a little more tempo after kind of what they did last year. Early in the season, I heard someone say everyone's playing like us but us, for the Pacers. And I think that's kind of what this is that you're this unique air quotes style isn't so unique, right? And so all of a sudden you don't look as fast. Teams are prepared for high-paced teams. Like the Kings 2 years ago went through the same thing, right? When they had their darling 3rd seed season, they had this awesome offense that was really fast and wow, look at De'Aaron Fox. And then the next year they fell back to earth a little bit offensively as the league kind of got to it. I think the Pacers were afraid a little bit that could happen, and they've bounced back offensively, obviously, recently, but certainly a tough thing for them to figure out is how do we get that juice and tempo back? I don't think it was intentional. I don't think they wanted to slow down. Haliburton's just brilliant in the open floor. They have a lot of great run to the corner shooter kind of guys, to use some coach speak. And, recently they get back to that a little bit where you'll see after made shots or after a player on the other team goes down or the ball goes flying in the crowd, they want to go get it quick. They want to get up the floor as fast as they can, just use the clock to their advantage, use a team running back to their advantage. And they have been better, I think, in those ways recently. But I think a big part of their pace differences this year is, when their defense stinks or when, they're missing so many guys, it's hard to play that identity, right? It's not an easy style to play if you're not used to it, if you're not really connected as a team. And with all due respect to their 2-way contract players or, some of their deep bench guys, you can't just come in and do it right away. You have to be playing fairly consistently, or at least, a couple times a week to be able to come in and connect to that kind of groove. So I think their injuries really hurt there. The other thing is they're seeing a ton of zone defense this year, most in the league from opponents, which makes sense. They don't have Buddy Hield anymore. They don't have Bruce Brown anymore. They don't have Doug McDermott anymore. They don't have Jalen Smith anymore. Those were good shooters as role players for their team. Bruce Brown, probably not a great shooter, but guys who could knock it down. They're getting zoned against a ton, especially their second units. And they have guys who can make threes. No one is a terrible shooter on the Pacers except for maybe TJ McConnell. But that makes it really easy to zone up against them. And they've had a couple games this year where that just cooks them up so much that they get slow, they can't score. And they have some games where they do great against the zone. They just ripped up the Miami Heat zone. But because that's kind of been an inconsistent result, teams have been really willing to go to that. That slowed down their games a bunch more than they saw last season. And with Haliburton not just shooting right over the top of them like he did last season, it just hasn't felt the same in the way they've been able to break those zones down. I think that's really slowed their pace meaningfully. So there's some stuff that they'll probably feel like is tangible and fixable, but the season's almost halfway over and
right.
it looks like this. So I think they can get probably finished. I bet they do finish the season top 5 in pace, but yeah, the rest of the league has certainly caught up to the way they want to play. And it's made it a little harder for them to stand out as a high paced team.
So I haven't studied the schedules of Detroit and Milwaukee and Chicago, but I would have to imagine that this is the final first matchup for any two teams in the Central Division. Like, I know the Cavs have played those other three teams, and I would imagine those other three teams have all played each other too, and the Pacers. But as an outsider, as somebody who has not yet seen the Cavs up close and in person, Tony, what has your impression been of the 30-4 as we record this? The Cavs played Charlotte Sunday night, but what has your impression of the Cavs start to the season been?
You could have said 31-4. Would have been okay.
I don't want to put the cart before the horse there.
Although the Hornets are 2-0 against the Pacers this year, so maybe I am the cart in front of the horse. Yeah, it's really fun to watch them. Like, I've made this joke a few times that every team that makes a coaching change for probably 10 to 15 years now is going to be like, the Cavs, we want that to happen to us because everything looks great. So here's a couple things that stand out to me. One is a guy that has the ball a lot's playing a lot better, and that helps your team. And that's Darius Garland, right? Who I didn't realize like how much his jaw thing messed up his grip. I'm sure you've talked about this all the time.
Right.
But that's really a really interesting thing to see how good, because he was so good when he was an all-star a few years ago, and it hadn't really felt the same sense because he's been in and out so much. Him being healthy and shooting really well again and consistent in an offense that suits him better has made them look amazing on the offensive end, obviously. I know a lot of people point to various improvements from different players, and I'll talk about Mobley in a second. But to me, that's been the biggest change from last year for the Cavs is when a guy that good has the ball all the time, you're going to be a better team. And Evan Mobley's passing is the coolest thing ever. I mean, it's people like, oh, his assist numbers aren't up that much, but it doesn't matter. Like he catches it at the elbow or at the free throw line or wherever the slot, just whips it to someone else or puts on like quick decisions, right? Like Spursy 0.5 second stuff that is really effective. He looks great. I've always been high on Mobley as well. So the two guys that I think people had the most questions about for their future of the Cavs or with the Cavs being way better as players and within that system has been really cool. And when you can do that and defend at the level they did a few years ago when they were at the top of the league, turns out that's a pretty good combination. So I've enjoyed watching them, even though I haven't gotten a chance to see them in person yet.
Well, you'll get a chance 2 times because the Cavs play the Pacers in each of the next 2 weeks. So, Tony, thanks so much for doing this. We will do this once again next week.
You got it.
There he is, Tony East. If you want to learn more about the Pacers before the first of 2 matchups the Cavs have with Indiana over the next couple of weeks, check out Locked On Pacers. Does a great job there. And the Cavs will continue on with taking on the Central Division as these 2 matchups are finally. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, do me that favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. I will be back tomorrow getting you ready for the Cavs matchup with OKC. It's a big one, so we're going to spend some time talking about how they match up with the Thunder right here on Locked On Cavs.